Sir? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you for the time that we can be here. We ask for your blessing in everything that we think about. We ask for your discernment that we can hear what you're wanting us to do and then the courage to do those things. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
You should have all had received copies of the last meeting. Any additions, corrections, or complaints?
Make a motion to accept or approve.
Fred and Rex.
Rex.
All those in favor of approval of minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You ready for this? You got it. I did. Yeah, bring Kelly. Kelly, would you like to present your?
I had emailed you all, I don't know, a couple days ago or something about, I had forgotten to put her on the agenda. So, sorry, Kelly. But here you are.
Here I am, and thank you for looking us in. Our request is, I'm from the library, Kelly Anger, I think I know everyone here, but a couple of our staff members are with me. Laura Schwartz, who's the Geneva branch manager, and Richard Island is the systems administrator. And we're here to request a van, actually the 1 to 2 year old in that range van for our outreach programs. And we run several outreach programs. The biggest one is bringing collections of books to our Amish schools. So we actually we've been doing this for years and years, but it's really expanded tremendously in the last few years. And so we're actually serving 43 schools. We drop off collections of books, return several weeks later, pick them up, move the books around to the different schools, and then deliver them again. So you want to talk a little bit about the process?
So how do you, if I could ask real quick,
Question?
how do you deliver them now?
I'm sorry,
How do you deliver those now?
we rent a van to do it.
Oh, you
We
do?
have been renting, so initially, a number of years ago, the branch manager, Rose Bryan, who was branch manager for a number of years, she would do it out of her own van or truck. But we also only served about 10 or 12 schools at the time.
Right.
And so that's just, as I said, it's grown. We're doing 43 schools. And so we rent, I don't know if you passed on this picture. This is really, we could pass that around, but that's about the number of books that's half of the collection.
I think 150 books that email said.
Yeah.
I was trying to visualize what 150 books would look
I
like.
have that upside down. Did you see it? Okay.
And this was approved by commissioners last week, actually. I don't know if I mentioned that or not.
The request was approved by the entire, and
What's the rent? What's the rent each month that you're paying?
well, it's per use, so it's $110 per use. And as I said, when we first started, it was, we only went once or twice, Well, thank you. We would go, maybe there might be 4 to 8 trips in a semester, or, in the first part of the year and then the second part of the year. And now to do the whole, all of the schools, it's 4 trips. So it's 4 trips each 5 or 6 weeks. You better actually answer that question.
Okay, we deliver 100 books to each school, and there's 43 schools, so 4,300 books. We can't fit all of those books in one van. We can fit half of the books in a van. So what we do is deliver the books on day one, and then we pick up half the books, deliver half the books, pick up half the books, and deliver the other half of the books. It takes 2 weeks to do both routes. And
Then you start again 4 weeks
and then we
later.
start again 4 weeks later.
So you say 110 per use, is that then per day, or do you have it for a weekend, it's $110?
For each day.
For each day.
So $1,500 to $1,800.
So last year we used the van, I believe, 17 times during the school year.
There are a few extra schools that we haven't yet served, and if we begin to serve them this fall, that's most likely an additional 2 days per cycle, just because of the number of books that fit in the van. So it's kind of at a tipping point, I think, for us about the cost of them and the cost of having a van. It's more ideal over time to have the van.
The program will almost certainly grow because of the number of schools that are being built. There are 46 schools that I'm aware of in Adams County, Amish schools. And of those 46, 43 choose to participate. But as they build more schools and more schools choose to participate, the program will grow.
Are there any fees for that, or?
Well, actually, the Farmers and Merchants State Bank helps fund the program by purchasing library cards for the schools because they're all outside of the district. So they purchase the cards. That's the only fee.
Are these books educational or for just reading pleasure?
They are both. So each school receives 100 books, and they're split into 2 tubs. Each school gets 2 tubs of books, one for the lower levels and one for the upper levels. And there are approximately 50 books. There's 50 books in each tub. And of those 50 books, about 35 of them are fiction books and 15 of them are nonfiction. So we do provide books for both educational purposes and recreational purposes, but either way that supports literacy in the Amish community for both the students and the teachers.
I know parental improvement is a big thing today. Have you ever had any complaints from the parents of the kids?
There have been schools that opt out of the program because the parents have decided that they don't want the outside influence on the students. But by and large, the program is supported very well in the Amish community, and they're very grateful to have the reading opportunities.
So just like, I guess, kind of do the math here real quick. So if it was maybe roughly around 2,000 for last year, is what you're saying you paid in rental costs?
I'm sorry.
Or renting that car out is about
Yeah,
2,000
17
roughly.
times and
Yes.
So, and then, but this at 50,000, that'd be like 22 and a half years of that vehicle, which just isn't going to last that long. So are you?
Yeah, that's a good point. But, we also have staff time that's involved in going to pick up the vehicle and drop off the vehicle. The amount of time that we lose because we can't just load them when we have everything ready, that actually factors into, I don't have a number of how that would measure out, but I think over time it makes more sense to have the vehicle itself. Also, we have other outreach programs, which I mentioned in the grant request. We go weekly to Woodcrest, both to the assisted living side and the independent living side, and we have outreach to preschools and daycares that the van would also be used for. So it's not, this is our primary use. It would be primarily used for the schools, and I think we'll be able to meet it out a little bit better in the timing of everything, but it also is used for other outreach programs as well. Would potentially be.
I guess that's what I was kind of looking at too, Corey, that the monthly or the yearly is 1,800. And then the van would be submitted 55,000 and plus the tax, well, maybe not tax, but then the financing would probably be up around $60,000.
We looked at, and the request is 50,000, but we looked at several online, and I don't know, maybe they weren't passed, or they passed on to everyone, okay. So knowing that those would not necessarily be available today, this is just a general guideline of what,
And I know
what
we're
we
not
could receive for that amount.
cheap
So
either.
does that, did you receive those?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I looked, tried to look online and find similar vans. They're just not there. That's the price it is.
Right, we didn't anticipate getting a new van, we anticipated a year.
Yeah, I think that was a 21,
Yeah,
but they're.
I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but right now, I would say, for me, I would prefer to table it for right now, just to do a little more research.
is there anything that you would like, or, anything
I
you would
mean,
like?
I just feel like maybe getting a little more creative. I wonder, I mean, even if you were to lease a van at this point, I almost think you're going to pay less than this amount for that. I'm just trying to do math in my head what a lease on a $50,000 vehicle would be, but it's probably going to be a lot less than what you're paying to. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, either that or a different van, or maybe we do a matching type deal. I don't know, but there's a lot of ARPA money being requested right now, so kind of want to not make a decision on any of them until we see all of them present here for a minute.
Small request compared to the,
I know, but they all add up.
yeah.
I think it's a good
Yeah.
project though. It's really, I like the
Yeah, we're
project.
definitely not saying no at this
Yeah.
point, but for
It
the time
definitely
being,
serves a community, I mean, this would serve a community, that's in need, you know,
right.
and also the other programs that we do. And we'd be happy to answer any other questions, or if you have specific, you know, if you want to funnel any questions to me.
I mean, even
we can
if
add later.
consider a trailer, an enclosed trailer.
Consider it.
When they're asking for a pull trailer.
That would be a little more difficult going into where we deliver. Sometimes there's just enough room for the van to get through and to deliver to the schools.
The
Just
schools
thinking
aren't
for
very accessible.
options too.
Yeah.
The trailer's not a good option.
I wouldn't do that.
What's your pleasure here? Come back
I would
later?
make a motion to table it for the time being.
Second.
Fred and John, table, later discussion. All those in favor? Opposed?
Before we go on, I need to make
I'm sorry.
an announcement. Between 9 and 9:30, they are going to, the state is here to do a fire alarm test. So sometime between 9 and 9:30, be prepared for that. It's just a test.
Let's hope the timing.
I always wondered, what if a real thing happened when they were supposed to be doing the test? I mean, it'd be weird.
Everybody be outside.
It's just going to be an alarm.
Hey,
Can I
Shannon, are
ask
they just going to do the
tabling it
test?
to
We
the
don't have
next
to actually do a
meeting,
drill?
or to next month?
It would go-
I don't know.
It's still on the list.
Yeah,
We don't have to go back.
we would not have a decision at the end of the meeting for sure.
I'm sorry.
It won't be,
Thanks for that.
we would not have a decision at the end of the meeting. It'll be to at least next
because
month.
It's not denied though. We have a list of requests, so this basically, we've heard what you're saying, and I think if there's any other questions, we can definitely let you know.
I think part of it is we're having some overruns on some of these projects. So we're kind of waiting for some of those to come in so we know exactly where we're at. It's like you don't want to keep writing checks if you're going to get overdrawn. We need to make sure we know. And Julie Ree had sent out something that that was up to that point, but even since then, I think we've had some payments come in and so forth. So it's kind of up in the air as far as how much over some of these things we're going to go from their original ask because of either inflation or whatever the case may be. So it's just kind of, I suspect council is just kind of stepping back for a second saying, we got to find out where we're at before we.
We haven't approved anything right off the bat.
No.
I mean, on any of them, so.
But I would say I would feel a little bit better if the math made a little bit more sense, right? I mean, 20 some years of usage for it to pay off. I mean, I get the time thing, but you know, you're also going to have to pay for upkeep that you don't have to pay for when you're renting, right? Like the servicing and all this other stuff. So I just want to make sure the math actually makes sense.
Yeah. But, we are.
Thank you.
WebEx.
Thank you, Kelly.
So, no idea.
Mr. LeBlanc?
When they get on the ground.
Renee here?
There, but you heard him.
Renee?
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to start off by thanking you all for the opportunity to submit our project proposal to the county council today. We did present last week and got the approval of the commissioners, and we're back again today to do the same. And before we kind of open, I just wanted to be noted that our initial request was reduced by about a third and revised, and that's what these sheets reflect, is that our request is significantly less than what we first requested when we filled out the ARPA funding application form. So with that, I would ask Ian to share with the room.
Yeah, Renee asked me to open and close this meeting just as I did the commissioners. So 16 years ago, about right now this month, Judge Fred Sugar called me into his chambers and said that the DOC had been here for a visit. And they told Adams County that we were sending too many people to prison and that there was a grant called for community corrections that Adams County could apply for. And if granted, that would initiate a program called Adams County Community Corrections to help deter the number of people sent to prison, thus save taxpayer dollars. Judge Sugar said, I don't have the time or the knowledge to do this, Ian, so I'm asking you to write this grant and start this program. Here I am today, 16 years later, still heart and soul in the community corrections program. One of the hurdles that I've seen throughout my career is the fact that we're given participants who suffer from addiction problems, drugs, alcohol, other types of addiction issues. Many times they've burnt their bridges. They don't have family members anymore that are willing to put up with them. They need some place to go. My program is home detention, not homeless detention. So if someone doesn't have a place to go while they could be doing time on home detention, they do their time in jail because we don't have an alternative here in Adams County, a place for them to go. I have been on served with a number of people, sat on a number of groups that have tried to get a recovery home started in Adams County. A good 12 years ago, a couple of gentlemen, Jerry Setzer, Mark Conrad, they were going to start a recovery home here in Decatur and had earnest money down on the facility. And at the BZA meeting, it was voted down because people didn't want those people in their neighborhood. Those people, and I'll talk about those people again in a little bit. Recently, folks from the Indiana Office of Court Services came to Adams County and did a study of our system, our judicial system. And one of the things that they identified, and we already knew this, that was lacking in our community, no recovery housing. You need to go to a sober living environment, you have to leave Adams County. And more recently, Judge Conrad has asked me to help start mental health court, which I think he'll talk about. Again, we're still at the same place we were 16 years ago when I began the journey in Adams County, trying to reduce taxpayer dollars and deter the number of people that go to prison. Now, not everybody that goes to a recovery home is in trouble with the law. Trust me, I know. But a lot of them will be, and a lot of them will be served on community corrections and in the recovery home at the same time. Now, I just want you to know that there have been so many roadblocks in the last 16 years. Who's going to run it? Where's it going to be? Because we don't want it in our neighborhood. And how's it going to be funded? Because obviously, you're looking for a facility that's going to hold 8+ people. It can't be a small little location. It's got to be either a large house that's renovated or a new facility. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle seem to be falling into place. We have the potential with the COVID relief money that could help fund this program. We have a location that won't bother anybody. No neighbors, Everyone's going to say, not in my neighborhood. I don't want those people in my backyard. And we have someone now in our community that has experience in running a recovery home, has proven success at his prior location, and is now living here and willing to do this in our community. So I feel more than ever, the pieces of the puzzle are into place to finally see what this community needs. A place for our friends, our family, our loved ones, our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our kids, our neighbors, to stay in the community, work in the community, get healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Judge Conrad?
Thanks, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all you. As Ian mentioned, I plan to start I'm going to call it Resilience Court here this summer at some point. And part of the idea behind that is to offer individuals that have some sort of stumbling block. I call it Resilience Court because I want to focus on what it takes to get through adversity, right? And so there's going to be a component of it that's mental health related, but also folks that are suffering from substance abuse issues as well. A lot of those are co-occurring issues. And so my purpose to have that court is to address those individuals that have those stumbling blocks in their life, whatever they may be. And a lot of those folks don't have a support system of a family around, friends that will allow them to crash on their couch and whatnot. They don't have that support system. And so as kind of was indicated by Ian, we've gone through Indiana Office of Support Services, sent some folks down to kind of do an assessment and a mapping of our services throughout the county. I know many of you on JRAC have heard this speech before, but we've kind of assessed what the resources are and the needs. And one of the big lacking things that for a number of years, before I was on the bench, you all know this, that transitional living, there just isn't many options here in the county, if at all, if any. And so a lot of what folks are ending up doing is there's various addresses around the county where you see individuals having to go to where they can't go anywhere else. And so I think that's up and down the county. I receive PC affidavits in the middle of the night all the time, and I can tell you the addresses that are there because we don't have that type of transitional housing. And so I'm supporting the idea of having recovery housing. We happen to have an individual that has run them. Now, how that looks, if that's the county purchasing a property and leasing it to an individual, if that's better, it's up to you all to make those decisions about how that happens. I'm just saying we need transitional housing. We need recovery housing in the county. I keep on mentioning transitional housing because one of the other aspects of the proposal, if you look at different kind of options, if you look at some sort of other housing and that already exists in the county, Golden Meadows, that type of thing, some of the things I think that the council should consider is, number one, obviously there's displacement of those that are already there, but then the transportation issue of having folks all the way out there where you have to have transportation to life necessities, so you're having to drive them back and forth. They're having to go to the bank. One of the issues at a resilience court is focusing on folks' financial literacy and making sure that they're on solid ground before they get back to society. And the ability to just, at the current location, to be able, or the proposed location is to be able to walk to and from those areas. But also future growth. And the reason I keep on mentioning transitional housing, there's a community transition program that exists in the state, which essentially allows inmates, before they are released from the DOC, to get them back into our community, right? So there's various reentry courts and there's other kind of problem-solving courts. In the future, that may be something that we pursue that allows individuals to get back reacclimated to our community rather than after they spend a significant amount of time at the DOC, you just drop them off and say good luck, versus having a program that allows these folks to transition back into society and support them so that they have a job, that they are the sort of supportive resources that we can provide as a community to foster their success. There's a lot of organizations that are focusing on this type of reentry population. Americans for Prosperity, number one, are big proponents of this type of idea, that you support folks back in the community so they can be contributing members of society and whatnot. And so I just bring up those points that we need recovery housing, we need transitional housing. The current proposal of having the location that it is, not only is it across from the jail to provide a secure location for the individuals that are actually there, and also because of transportation issues, allow them to get where they need for life's necessities and so forth. But it also, I think importantly, has the potential for future growth, so that if there is a more of a need in the future, you can expand in that location versus if there's, if you kind of use a current location out in the middle of the country, there may not be the same opportunity and ability to expand that sort of program. And as I see it, the Resilience Court is obviously something I am excited about. I think it'll be a positive for the community. And then as I look into the future, these other type of programs where we assist folks on the margins of society get back into being contributing members, I think that that proposal offers that opportunity. So I just appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bear.
Michael Bear, former high school teacher, South Adams, 22 years. And I'm here as a supporter of what Renee's program has been because I work a great deal in addiction recovery and support right now through a project called Brianna's Hope. We host a chapter in Bern. In 2 years, we've gone from 20 individuals to over 60 on a regular basis. And my heart is totally in this because the vast majority of those participants are former students. Faces that I loved in the classroom, I was invested in then, and now choose to continue to invest in because they're still dear to my heart. And as was already mentioned by Ian, their family members, their parents and their children, their grandparents raising their grandkids because their own children are incarcerated or somewhere lost. And so a great deal of my time, fortunately, in working in retirement through First Missionary Church has given me the opportunity, the flexibility to just invest in some of these lives, to come and support those families. And I just would like you to seriously consider a plan that really has all the pieces together in a time of great, great need. Thank you.
And Kevin. Mr. Biggs.
Thanks, Renee. Before I present, would you mind just introducing the board to the council?
Absolutely. And if you'll notice on your third page of the handout, I'm very aware that the LeBlanc name doesn't carry a lot of weight in Adams County, but I've been very thorough and proactive in putting a board together of individuals who are very respected, I feel, in this community and will hold this nonprofit to its highest standards, including Haley Beer with Edward Jones Financial here in Decatur, Eric Lehman, pastor at the Bridge in Bern, Mr. Kevin Biggs here, we know from the Biggs Group, Michael Bear, who just spoke from First Missionary, and Katie Wilson, attorney at Sprunger and Sprunger in Bern.
Renee. My first kind of eyes open to this was 3 or maybe 4 years ago. I was talking with Ian that Ian called me up and wanted to have a meeting in my office and explain the need then. And I think, as we all know, this has been an elusive issue for many, many years that we've been trying to solve. And it just hasn't been the right kind of ingredients that have all come together at the right time. But I recognized with Ian when he sat in my office here several years ago talking about this issue, and and I said, absolutely, we'd love to help out from a development standpoint. How can we either find an existing home? How can we do something new? One of the key factors there, though, back then was, number one, who's going to run this thing? Because we can property manage, but I'm not going to get pulled into trying to manage a facility like this without any experience, because it takes someone very unique that has a special skill set to do that. So that was a big hurdle. And then we were also, well, how are we going to fund this thing? So we didn't have a solve for that either. Fast forward about a year ago, this gentleman shows up And I got to know Renee, and we went out to breakfast actually with Ian. And I said, wow, this is incredible, because here's a gentleman that has a proven track record of developing a program like this, running it successfully, and it's still successful today down in Louisiana. So over the course of the year, I've kind of continued to get to know Ian, but we still had one missing challenge. We didn't have a good funding source. So we kind of put it on pause. We waited, and along here comes several months ago. Now it seems like the different ingredients are kind of aligning together. As I've done development work throughout the region here in Northeast Indiana, I've worked with a lot of different communities, and I always tell people I'm very proud to be here from Decatur and Adams County. And I think we have great leadership. We have a lot of great things going on here in this county. But I do recognize that there's a void, and I see this type of work in other counties that is much needed, and I know it's much needed here. The character and health of a community is not defined by the fortunate. It's defined by the less fortunate and those in need. And so I believe that this community truly needs to recognize that we have a lot of great things going on here, but this is an issue that's been elusive and we've been trying to solve for many, many years. And I finally think now is the time that we have all the elements that are coming together to finally get this done. So I really appreciate your time here today and listening to our presentation, and want to thank you. I'll turn it back over to Renee.
Thank you, Kevin. So I had sent informational documents over the past few weeks or months or so, and hopefully everyone here has a general idea of the program we're trying to do here. And as you can see, we do have the proper pieces of the puzzle in place, a potential for ORPA COVID relief funding that was intended to help those who were negatively impacted due to COVID. And I feel that those struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues were the most highly affected by the pandemic. And we're not just a treatment center or a recovery house. We are teaching people life skills to get them from being a burden to society, or what I call the least of these, the underserved population group in this community, and give them the housing, food, and clothing, basic survival needs, as well as the job readiness training, the job placement assistance, the transportation, the support group meetings, the parenting skills, the budgeting skills, the outlined treatment plans for each individual, so that in a year's time, and it's not just 1 year, if they need more time, that's completely acceptable, that when they're ready to re-enter society as productive, contributing members of society, of this community, no longer a burden to the taxpayers, but contributing to the economic development of this community as well. To put it in real simple perspective, is in-house 30-day treatment easily costs over $20,000. An emergency room visit due to overdose, cardiac arrest can easily total $20,000 plus, and incarceration here in the Adams County Jail is more like $30,000 per year to house one individual. If we would take one individual per month at $20,000 per month, in 12 months, it's nearly $250,000. So 4 years would almost pay back our request, and that's just based on one individual month. We propose housing 16. So imagine the economic impact that would take off the front end of addictions, recovery, judicial system, incarceration, et cetera, and the back end. And this isn't just taking from funding source and not giving back. This would pay for itself exponentially over the years and would be a good form of, like Kevin said, bringing up the lowest population group in our community to productive members of society, based in Adams County, for Adams County, run by Adams County, in partnership with Adams County. As we know, there are no services described here in existence at this moment that provides everything that we would. So thank you for this time, and if there is any time, feel free to ask any questions as we wrap it up.
So in your previous situation, how did that get funded?
So the difference in Baton Rouge, number one, it was pre-COVID, so it was a world difference. We did fundraisers, and when the board decided we had enough money, we rented a house from an individual who was okay with us housing that population group. Because it's not just finding a house for rent. The homeowner needs to be okay with it. And again, now we face the not in my backyard mentality. So that's what we did. We also got PPP funding during COVID, and the same here. Not only will hopefully ARPA help with the construction costs, and if we are awarded the opioid overdose settlement money, that will help with ongoing costs. Residents also pay rent of $150 per week that goes towards their room and board, transportation, etc. So in a year or so, we should be self-reliant and not having to come back and ask for any upfront money, which 80% of this is for construction purposes, not for the program itself.
So we looked at trying to fund anything like that. I mean, I've heard some of the names that have signed on for this, and Kevin being one of them, that definitely has, needs to possibly support this. And I mentioned in our last meeting, I think we need to knock on the hospital's door. This sounds like a great thing to me, but I do think it should be privately funded. That opens the door for, I think, in my opinion, most good recovery programs should have some faith element to it. I would hope this one would too. But that does bring in, a conflict with our government doing that. Oftentimes they don't look favorably upon the crossover. But, we're just now, in the last few weeks, have heard about this, and now you're wanting a decision that quick, and there's no way I can say yes to that right now. We're a small county, small community with we're facing a lot of things right now with not just COVID funds, but just everyday operational funds. And so for me right now, I just can't. Again, I think it's a great idea, and I'm not saying we don't need it, but I do think we need to look elsewhere right now for the funding and see how that goes.
I appreciate your feedback, but when it comes to footing the bill for something like this, our options going residential are highly opposed, which would be on a much lesser ask as opposed to something like this, which would be near the jail. We're not asking for community dollars in a sense. We're asking for federal dollars for COVID relief money, intended to help this population specifically. And with all due respect, I think that privately funded organizations like this can only happen whenever they're CARF accredited and taking insurance payments, and that's not something that we do. We're not a medical or a clinic. We are transitional housing that would not be able to generate these kind of funds to be able to provide this much needed service in the community. So we were asked or encouraged to apply for this. The notice or the short span, I don't want to, carry that burden. We've done a whole lot, gone to Rotary, Chamber, Ministers Association, newspapers, everywhere we can go. We've mentioned this for months and months. This is not brand new, and
But it's brand new to the people you're asking the money for. So at this point, I think there may be some other avenues. And again, I think it's very worthwhile. But ultimately, we need to be good stewards with our taxpayer money here. If I had an open checkbook, I'd write you the check. But ultimately, we need to be good stewards with our taxpayer dollars, and there needs to be a little more, looking into other alternatives, and maybe that involves us in some way, shape, or form. I don't know for sure at this point, but right now, today, I absolutely cannot vote for that. That's a big price tag for our taxpayers here to pay, especially when we have all these other challenges. So
would y'all consider partial funding and at least putting
I can't
us
say
on
that
the?
right now. I can't say that right now. Like for me, I'll speak for myself. I won't.
So there's also been the issue brought up about government funding religiously affiliated groups and the stipulations that come with this, the COVID money from the government. So in certain situations, our hands are tied as a body on what we can and cannot spend the money on too.
And we've done a deep dive and research on that factor because we wanted to clarify that we are a 501c3. We are not a religious organization. We do not proselytize. We are not a church. We are a public charity defined by the IRS guidelines providing recovery housing. So there is that separation concern. I understand, but I've spoken with the county attorney, Ms. Julie Brown, to ensure that we do not cross that line. And she assured me that if you were in violation of that, you wouldn't even be on the agenda. So
I'm sorry, let me correct you. We spoke and I told you that with regards to your application, it was ARPA eligible for consideration. But I did specifically caution you that operation of the facility was contingent upon compliance with those certain federal guidelines. So it's not as if this is a done deal. It's not as if it's perfectly fine now. Your conduct and operation of the facility is a factor, and the council's anticipation of that is a factor in their consideration because there's a considerable liability to the county if in fact something is not done in accordance with the federal guidelines.
Can I speak to that for just a second? So certainly compliance is a tremendous issue here with federal dollars. My organization is attached to several READY awards that are actually ARPA dollars flowing through the state for some housing projects. So we are deeply involved right now in understanding compliance related to how these ARPA dollars need to be spent, procurement practices. Now, that's one part of the compliance. This, I believe, is another issue and part of compliance that would need to be adhered to as well. I strongly believe that there is a path forward that we can get this done without crossing the line. And as a board member and the commitment of the rest of the board, we would be willing to workshop, take whatever classes we need to have to make sure as we steer this, not just through the development, but ongoing operationally, that we're making sure that we are soundly in the green here to make sure that we're not crossing the line. As Renee described, we are not a religious organization at all. There is a faith-based component to this, but there are many, many other examples of faith-based operations that are being funded with federal dollars. So we clearly understand that's a concern, and we want to make sure that you understand that we would take that very seriously ongoing as well. I also just want to, go ahead, Fred.
I understand that. Again, I think a good recovery program should have a faith-based element, a faith element to it. But again, we are just now being brought into this loop. And we're being asked for $1.2 million, which is that's a big number for us. So sitting here with the little knowledge I have of it, I absolutely cannot vote for that. So I think there are other alternatives to potentially working with the county, maybe the city, I don't know, but what that looks like at this point. So am I saying we should, throw everything out? No, not necessarily, but we need to be looped in and see what we can do. But just to come in here and say, I'm going to vote for $1.2 million of taxpayer money, I'm not doing it.
Well, I would love to be able to make sure that any of the questions get addressed here with the council. We really appreciate your time of being able to present to you. We have other board members here that can answer any questions that you have, but we'd love to hear from other questions that the council might have. And if there is a path forward, how would we work with council so that we can give you more time and to make sure that questions.
That would involve the commissioners, some of the council, and maybe some other county representatives, I believe. Obviously, something like that would have to be ironed out. But, yeah, that's just a big ask right off the cuff. And, again, we have many challenges within our county. And so right now, again, I'll speak for myself. I cannot support it right now. Again, is it needed? Sure it is. Is it worthwhile? I'm sure it is as well. But it would not be responsible for us to just, in my opinion, to just say, okay, right now.
I would say, and I know Fred and I talked about this a while ago, but generally speaking, I'm in favor of this program in general. I did tell Fred and I told Julie, yeah. I don't think I'm going to actually vote on it just because one of your board members is one of my employees. So just for that conflict there, I don't want to cause any issues, but that doesn't stop me from speaking my support in general. I think this would be a different conversation if, Ian and the judge weren't here saying, hey, we're county entities and we need this thing. By them being here saying that, to me, it's like, hey, we need this. Our county government is telling us it needs it. I think you got the track record, you got the background, you got the history. This is not just going for it. I know that some of this includes operating expenses, but that's just to get you going basically for the first year. And the way I'm looking at it, you basically have, realistically, there's 900,000 is what you're looking for to get the building going. That's like the one time. And if we can cross that hurdle, my understanding is you guys are going to do this one way or the other. It's just a matter of, is this going to take you 5 years to raise the money? Or can you skip that building step and go right to it right out of the gate? So, I don't hear that you're saying you need us to fund you forever and that you need this to be some kind of a government program. You're just looking for the allocation of that federal grant money to speed it up, basically, get you across the finish line to get started, which I think makes sense. And then on that separation of the establishment clause issue, although I'm an attorney and I have given presentations on separation of church and state multiple times, I'm not giving legal advice right now. Let's just be clear about that. But there's a path here. Like this is not an issue that, it's something we need to be aware of, but it happens all the time. Government funding organizations, even religious ones, for certain projects that have public benefit. The question comes down to, are we selectively choosing you over a different religious? Are we choosing one over the other? And I don't see another option for this here. So I think there's definitely a path. So generally speaking, I'm in favor. And I think what he's saying is we maybe just need to slow down a little bit, take a little bit more time to chew on this. I think that's what he's saying.
We need to explore other options too. And honestly, one of them needs to be private funding, in my opinion. I mentioned in I sat in a meeting with you 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, and I do think you need to knock on the door of the hospital. They would be, I would think, intricately involved to some degree with some of this. And right now, I feel like there's a lot of people eager to spend the taxpayer dollars, spend money on this as long as it's not their money that they say they're for it. So, again, we have responsibility to the taxpayers that we all try to, I believe all of us take it very seriously. And this is a big ask. And for me, after we have our operating expenses, one of the things we need to look at for our county is its growth. And that's something I personally am very focused on for our communities here. So again, it sounds very worthwhile, and I'm not saying there's not a path forward, but today I won't vote for that. So.
Fred, I do want to let you know that I did have a meeting with Scott Smith at the hospital for your recommendation. And feel like I entered a dynamic there that I didn't have much backstory on. His recommendation was to come and make the presentation here with you all today. They do strongly support this initiative of what we're doing, but they didn't outright offer
Sure.
to take a huge financial responsibility. But I want to let you know that I did on your council go have that meeting with them and bring them to the loop. So.
I'm not sure there's a person in this room who doesn't believe it's a great and noble cause and program. It's just that I think the funding at this point, who's it going to be? Where's it going to come from? Is it or can it be from here or private?
And one thing
is just
Ian and the judge both know, we're sitting on a committee right now because we have problems with some of our judicial facilities. And if we get that going right now, we're staring at another bond, staring right in the face. We have two out right now. One for the hospital, one for the jail. And then we have other challenges in there as well. So, I mean, we just have to be very careful about how we spend our money and what that looks like going forward. And right now, I think we have some very affordable living in this part of the country and the state, and we want to keep it that way, but we also want to grow. And so that's why we need to be very wise with how we spend our money. And again, I don't think anybody's opposed to it, but we need to all get looped in and see what our options are.
We have a request for ARPA use funds for this project at the amount of $1.2 million. We'll need a motion to either approve or deny.
Well, I don't think yet. I think we should, we may just want to keep talking a little bit about this rather than going yes or no. I know, because I feel like what I'm hearing is everyone's saying this is a good project. Do we want to bite off the whole thing? Do we bite off half of it? Do we build a building and lease it to you instead? Do we, Stan, I know I had some other ideas this morning. You were mentioning that he probably wants to raise here in just a second. So maybe we need to chew on it a little bit more. Maybe we say what we said to the folks this morning. Let's make a decision on all this ARPA funds. Let's kind of do it at one time, maybe next month, or let's just chew a little bit more.
Well, I would say, I've talked about some of those, prior to this meeting, talked about some potential other options for your situation as well as that involves some of our other situations. So again, that's what I'm talking about with looping everybody in and seeing what the viable alternatives are. I would still say no to 1.2 million. And so,
right. But I guess
does that mean
it might
no
not be
to everything going forward? No. I'm not saying.
Procedurally, what has been sent to the council for consideration is an award of $1.2 million to Crossroads for this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's on the table. That's what an up and down yes or no vote needs to be. Later on, if they want to reapply, if the commissioners reconsider, if it's restructured, this is what we need. We have this much private funding now. It needs to come over here with a more detailed plan that you can digest. Right now, it's up and down, $1.2 million, yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And from that's, yeah, right. So right now, again, later on, if we get something worked out, I'm not going to say yes or no anything to, right now, because we don't know. But to 1.2 million, I'll make a motion to say no to that.
A second.
Seconded. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm saying.
Corey abstained. Thank you for your time.
A couple questions. If it's real quick, I have a question. If there's not another version of something that gets worked out or whatnot, what's the next plan? I guess, at this point, is it, let's say the county says no, period, ever, like no money whatsoever. I assume it's still going forward. It's just going to be slower, right?
Well, according to the American Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, and prior lawsuits that I've studied before, we could move into a residential house despite pushback, but we would have much rather honey than vinegar. And we respect the community and neighborhoods and not wanting it in their backyard. But if we can't do this and we have to go to Plan B, well, that's between the board and us as far as what options do we have. And we're going to move forward regardless. We're not going to wait 5 years to sell plate lunches to raise this money. We'll do what we can in the meantime. And
Again, my suggestion, first of all, I think there does need to be some private fundraising. I know Scott Smith said what he said, but I'm sure he wants to wait to see what the answer is here, and now you know. But that needs to be done. And
we've
then-
done a good bit of fundraising prior to even holding our first fundraiser. We've raised over $70,000 towards this, and we're doing our due diligence. It's just,
Again, I think it's part of putting a committee together that involves commissioners, council, which I'd love to be a part of, and anybody else who, would be pertinent to that conversation. We should put that together and start seeing what our options are. That's how I think we should proceed. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, having a follow-up committee that we can really workshop this out. So if you don't mind, we'd love to reach out to you here after council and have a discussion about that and who can participate and what that process would look like.
Sure. Appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Jeremy up next.
Jeremy?
As Jeremy's coming up, just a little explanation on what he's here to do. And the commissioners are here, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but he is looking at covered bridge repairs and so forth. I forget the exact amount, 30,000 something.
$30,800.
And commissioners had wanted him to come before council to see how they would like to pay for these repairs. There is a covered bridge fund.
What's the balance of that? We were talking about that last.
What's that?
What is the balance of that? Do you know?
Around 16,000. The problem with using much of the covered bridge fund is it does not regenerate quickly. I think it's around maybe 1,800 a year, or is that right? Something like that.
Something like that. It's not a whole lot.
It doesn't revive itself very quickly. So I think Commissioner's direction was to ask council, do you want to take part of that and part from another fund? How would you like to proceed in paying for the repairs? And I'm sure Jeremy will explain what they are and why they're needed.
Yes, correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe both boards were on board with this.
Say that again.
I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe both boards were on board with this.
I don't know.
I think so.
I don't know if this was part of the original, was this part of the original 227?
It was, yes. It was approved along with the original.
Okay, so if that is part of the 227, I think the question still came up when it went back to commissioners about
Correct.
funding the thing and, kind of piggybacking on everything that just happened prior. We are currently in a federal audit, and we are finding out that they're asking for things that we did not necessarily do properly. We may not have gotten contracts the way we needed to. Things went to this board, then it went back to this board, then you were asked to get quotes, and Bree and I are up there going, what in the hell is going on? And now we're being audited and they're asking me all these questions because it's so confusing. I don't think anybody can keep up with it. I think you can say that from what you sent out, that's part of it. We don't know where we're at yet. We're having overages on some of these original requests that are coming in higher than what the original quote was, and I don't know why, but that's what happened. So all I'm saying from my standpoint is we have to be very careful in what we do and how we do it. So if this was part of that 227,
It was part of the original, I think it was a little bit more than that.
It was two separate applications.
Right, it was two separate applications, and they were both approved, and together they totaled more than the 227. The 227 was ultimately approved, but I think the bridge was part of that, and then we separated it out.
and then the commissioners wanted quotes. And I know Mark mentioned procurement and that kind of thing, and the quotes came back, and if I'm not mistaken, some of those quotes came back less than what the original ask was for, which is great, because that leaves you a little more money in there. So I just want to be clear on what we're doing so that we do it correctly.
So do we, right now, we stand at, we need to approve something?
$30,800 is needed for the bridge improvements. It was originally requested as an ARPA fund request. However, there may be other avenues to pay for it. So the commissioners specifically referred it back over here for consideration as to where it's coming. Either it's going to be ARPA, Cume Bridge, general, something.
Are you shaking your shake? It cannot come out of there?
I'm not sure that would be a whole another thing to look at.
I mean, if we could take it out of there, I would like to. So
I don't see why it wouldn't. You can take it out of that pretty easy.
take it out of the Cume Bridge.
I mean, that's just something I'd have to look into. I mean,
Yes. So my first.
Covered bridge, I don't see it's part of Cume Bridge.
Oh, it's not.
Well, it's like so
Covered
one
Bridge
thing-
has its own fund.
It's on the National Registry as a historical bridge, covered bridge, right? So, I mean, there's not very many of those left. I just happen to know this because I go to the Parks Board and we were talking about it. And I forget what's the gentleman's name who's on.
Lehman.
Randy Lehman.
Randy Lehman has done a lot of research on the covered bridge. And so it's, there's not a lot of those left. And, you know, here in Adams County, I think that is something that I think we want to maintain. But if it can come from Cume Bridge, I would prefer that, but I'm not opposed to ARPA funds either for it. It's not a huge ticket item.
We can go up on that state board right now.
Do we
Just
know,
happen to be 6 of them.
is that quote? We're absolutely not going to go over on that.
I believe so. Unless there's something that they really can't see, because the majority of it's painting, the rest of it is just tightening the trusses, tightening the truss rods. So I don't really see a whole lot.
Okay.
Bree, are you looking
I
for
have a
the
chance of it
covered
overage.
I got it.
fund?
Covered bridge, it's at 16,293.
What are we
16,000?
asking
Well-
right now? Because what I have in claims to be paid the 21st is for covered bridge parking lot improvements. And says that your trail connection at Snow Cemetery.
That's separate. That's in the same
So that's
location,
separate?
but that was on the original application. Yes,
And those two are being paid out of ARPA.
correct.
Yes.
So what you're asking for now is something separate from these two.
It was on the the second application that we put in for,
Okay,
for
if you
the,
guys are questioning paying it out of ARPA and paying it out of Cume Bridge,
What else
I'm
can it be
gonna-
paid
I'm
out
gonna
of
say if we
besides?
can take it out of Cume Bridge, we should.
there's a covered bridge fund, but there's only
Six-
about.
16.
Yeah, there's not enough there.
16,293.
Yeah, there wasn't enough. So I think then the question was,
I think with that,
Where does that money come from? Is that a general?
so there's 16,293.99, and I think we only get.
Small settlement average.
yeah, yes, that is.
perhaps that's around 1,200 or
I'd
Yeah,
rather-
we get
I'd
1,800
rather
a year.
leave
So
that money
it's covered
And
bridge.
payment for ongoing
They
maintenance.
asked.
Yeah, you gotta have, because it's gonna keep happening.
Andy had a comment?
You only
Yeah,
get.
no, I'm just gonna say in the covered bridge, I think.
Now it's all circling back.
Stipulate that we can only spend it on the covered bridge. And we only have one covered bridge in the county, so I don't know why we wouldn't take all that money and spend it on the covered bridge. And then find the rest of the money.
Well, I think an answer to that is Tim Barkey, when he was here, did not want to do that because it recovered so slowly that if something were necessary to do on the covered bridge, there wouldn't be the money for it. But Brad could probably answer that better than I can.
If the parameters are so narrow that this is the only thing we can spend that on, then it seems like it would make sense to spend that fund on the covered bridge, you know? And if there's something comes up, I mean, if we do all these repairs and updates on the covered bridge, you know, hopefully any maintenance that would come in the next few years would be relatively small.
And there's still not enough in there to cover the whole thing though, so you're gonna do half and half.
Get $1,850
Yeah.
from the state for covered bridge, and it goes in
Pretty
that
close.
fund. The balance today of $16,293.99.
If something did
Well,
come
I would
up.
say we just use that to start with and
I
then
mean,
the
if
other
something
half,
did come up, you just have to find another way to pay for it. If there's not enough in
just
that.
like we're doing right now.
Take 15 out of covered bridge and find 15 either in rainy day or summer.
Or something. Whatever fund you guys
Yeah,
direct.
I
Brad.
assume ARPA.
If we're gonna take out of there, then I don't think we should take any more than 10 and get the rest from somewhere else and that, because ongoing you know, $1,000 doesn't go far.
I mean, this is one of those cute funds where that money just sits there, and now you think that the covered bridge, improve expense on there, it's not use it.
Tony, do you have any money left at special donations?
I don't know. We've used it a couple times. Bree, do you know how much is in special donations currently? Or if any of that was spoken for already?
Balance right now is 85. And no, nothing's.
Jeremy, do you-
Right, no.
Are we spending money every year on the covered bridge?
Yeah, sometimes could be anywhere from 1,000 to a couple thousand. And a lot of that is vandalism and such. I have talked with county IT about cameras linked to the Geneva Police Department and the Geneva Town Hall to try to help with that and actually be able to prosecute. We're still kind of in limbo, going back and forth, trying to figure out the better
What kind of
alternative there.
violations?
But we have several kids with cans of spray paint down there every year. Spray painting inside of it and stuff. So we definitely need to do something with, you know, as you invest money into this to help protect your investment.
Brad?
And I'm not saying Cuban Bridge couldn't pay for it, because I know before me, Tim had told me he had done projects down there before. It was similar stuff to what they're doing. And I can't honestly answer where that was paid from. If it was out of that fund, you know, if one time it had more money in it, and they used it. So I'm just saying I can't answer that for sure, but I can do some research to see what they did in the past.
It's not
with
a,
other projects.
that number's not a massive number,
That's
so
not a huge number.
I'd almost be in favor of leaving the funds that are there now, there for ongoing maintenance, and if it accrues some, then something like this, at some point, you're gonna have periodic, more high dollar maintenance, and when it can fund the whole thing, it would be there. It's just my thought.
I'd assume use the covered bridge fund. That's what it's there for.
Well, we have a request for ARPA funds in the amount of $30,800. So
Not necessarily, you just need to consider where they come from. It can come from ARPA, but
Well, you said it was previously approved as ARPA?
it was. They said that, but commissioners wanted you to reconsider as to whether or
Oh.
not that's the source of the funding or if it should be something else. It can still be ARPA.
Well, actually, then do we even have a choice if it's already been approved? Do we have to go that route?
No, you approved using ARPA funds, and then it went to the commissioners, and the commissioners specifically asked for a reconsideration as to whether or not it should be ARPA or not. It can be ARPA. It's fine. We've already approved that. The commissioners are simply asking
Or it could be
for,
half and half, it could be
Right.
whatever.
just asking for reconsideration.
Why don't we just take half of it, the 15 from the bridge fund that it's there for, and then leave the other 15 that's already been approved? That way, that extra 15 can basically go towards some of these overages that are gonna happen in the other ARPA stuff.
Yeah. I agree.
So you want to do 15 from the bridge fund and the
Leave the
remaining
other-
15.8 from ARPA?
That's all I would say. I mean, I feel like use your most restrictive money when you can.
Yeah. I second.
Was that a,
Corey
you made a motion?
Sure, yeah.
15 covered bridge. Bridge, though, not King Bridge.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah. And that leaves like 3,000 in there or so, which I know it's not a lot. But
Thanks about.
Have a motion to approve?
yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That was Corey and John, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Shelley? More money.
Morning.
Good morning. Okay. The reason I'm here is for election equipment. And I had actually done a proposal to do for request for ARPA if possible. But due to what Julie Marie had said about obtaining bids, in order to do so, it's a little difficult. So I'm trying to understand what we can do as far as either do it under a budget line item or request for ARPA. So I brought,
Real quick, so the voting equipment thing is kind of a have-to thing at this point, right? We need to replace it.
Not necessarily. The state is going to, I'm sorry, I'm Steve Shamma with Microvote. We do our annual election health check here, but the state is purchasing for you the new booth that we demonstrated last time. I have it outside for after the meeting if anyone's looked at it, and the paper trail device that comes with it. Your voting panels as they exist right now are functional, and they will function through the year if need be. There's a dramatic improvement in that individual panel itself for the screen quality, color options, and highlighting selections that take it to a different level. That's what we're discussing in terms of the higher ticket item for that component. And that's where it sounds like it's getting complicated in that it's a sole source product because it's merely a component in a much larger certified system. The system, we don't certify just that piece of it. We have to certify end to end from the laptop that we read the votes into, the cables, the booth, everything. And so it's like a part of a car that goes in to that device. And so after Shelley saw it down in Jay County, saw there was a dramatic improvement for the quality of voting for the voters. Is it absolutely necessary? No, it's not absolutely necessary at this time. We did a reinvestment, I think in 2016. The commission and council approved 20 cents on the original dollar, upgraded the equipment to try to get us another 10 years of life out of it, knowing that those screens were going to start fading a bit and getting more pixelated as time went on. And so we're at I guess we'll be at the 8-year mark going into the presidential election at that point, leading to the off year after that, and then 2026. And so the idea was do we make the push for this improved panel for the big hitter election next year at this time to get the entire system up to the high screen quality in conjunction with the paper trail device for the auditability. And so that's kind of where we stand. So to say it's absolutely necessary, no, you would get through next year. Would it be a dramatic improvement? Yes, it would.
You said we're on 8 years now of what's the lifespan of it?
Well, it's as long as we can keep breathing life into it. I mean, we have plenty of parts, components. The thing that we can't replace anymore is the screen itself. That was an end-of-life product a couple years ago. And so when we go to improve the screen, we're getting to the point where it doesn't make much sense to put that much money back into a single component.
You're concerned about the screen failure, right?
Or just the appearance in general.
and how it would fit in the new cases that were actually,
Yeah.
I mean, it does fit,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the smaller panel, with everything that's going to be fit into this case, just looks, more functional.
My whole question about this was the best way to fund it. Bree, I'm looking at you, because you and I talked about it.
Yeah.
Well, you and Shelley talked about it. I mean, would it be the best way of what we talked about the day when I was in Shelley's office, or ARPA?
Because I think we decided, which I did do my budget and I submitted it, and I put it under the line item, under cum cap for the clerk. I put the whole amount in that I would include my e-poll pads, which I definitely need right away. That is definitely a need because they're no longer supported by Apple.
It's the model of iPad that you have for the electronic poll book. Apple suspended security patches on it. So it's not as daunting as it sounds because it's kind of a sealed system anyhow. But Apple is no longer going to supplement the model with the most recent updates of security patches.
Gotcha. Or the device itself, the actual iPad.
The iPads function. The problem is the certification process always gets in the way with this. So for No Ink to upgrade their software package, they have to say specifically what model they're going to be putting it on. And so what's kind of like a Windows 7 to 10 sort of scenario. Mm-hmm. Same thing with their software. If Windows isn't going to recognize, Apple isn't going to recognize a security patch, then they have to change the product that will only run on the higher grade pad.
If you remember, when I first became auditor, we needed new software for treasurer, auditor, X-Office, $240,000. We built that into the budget, and then you all determined how, we didn't have ARPA then. Now that you have ARPA, that's obviously one way you could do it, or you can just build it into the budget and find a way to pay for it out of your actual budget during budget time. This would be in her line. I mean, it's
understand that. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, what is the best way?
You can make 2 payments, correct? Like, make a payment 1 year. So if you wanted to do that, you could pay it out of QCAP and make half payment 1 year and then the next year. So that way it's not hitting all the tax dollars in 1 year. If you want to do the ARPA way, the money's sitting there, you could pay it all in 1 year and be done.
If this is done through the budget process, is that will be able to be implemented like by the presidential? Which I know it's November, but
You get the there's
primaries.
a 6-month lead time on the panel. So I think if this was decided by, say, like September-ish, then we would have the ability to get it in place for the primary of next year and go from there. And as she mentioned too, that like what Jay County did in the scenario is they budgeted half of it for next year and then the other half for 2025 when there was no election.
Through the budget process.
Do it that way?
No, not so.
The budget process.
So you're not talking about a whole new system, you're talking about upgrade to a current system, right?
Yeah.
So this wouldn't be something that you would bid out since it is building on a current system, correct? And what is your anticipated price tag if you were to buy it now?
What was it like, just for the panels or everything that I?
Well, for everything that you are needing for this.
The reason I kind of separated it out a little bit because Microvote does who I would pay for the panels and the printers that we would need, these speed printers that I need. But No Ink would be the one that I would purchase the e-poll pad for the poll pads. So it'd be like 2 separate vendors in a sense. So I think with the panels themselves was almost like $211,000, I think, for that, but then an additional $13,000 for the separate. So if we put it all, I don't know if we can put it all together for ARPA because it's 2 separate vendors.
So if we run it through the budget process instead, then we're gonna have all of our budgeting, we'll have a good idea what we think we're doing at the end of August, which would then be at the September meeting. I know that budgets aren't actually official until, a while, but at least at that point you would know this is what the plan is. Would that be that'd basically be September, would that be enough time at that point?
It should be. We'll be right at it. So basically, the goal is to, when you think about the election, it's not first week of May. The election is really, we start voting a month before, and we prepare the equipment 4 weeks before that. So we're looking middle March when we start really getting the ball rolling.
Our budget workshop with DLGF is middle of July.
Mm-hmm.
When we go through everything with them, following all of that, it then goes out to you guys, so you would have a decent idea of here's what the clerk's budget looks like, and
And we would know all that by September, so we'd be, the September meeting, we'd know where we're at.
And you don't anticipate that there would be a substantial change in the cost between now and September?
There'll be no change. at all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's locked in for, more than enough time.
So we just gotta make sure whenever the council approves, funding, that when it goes back to the commissioners, we gotta make sure we follow the procurement guidelines. And when it's a single source for supply, electronic data processing contracts, there's some exceptions under the procurement statute for that, but we gotta make sure we make a good record on the procurement procedures.
I think we went through this exact same thing with, pre-ARPA was when we did the upgrade of the panels. We had a similar discussion about it kind of being a sole source only scenario because it was a component of the overall system.
So does the price tag include your support, like at the actual loading time too?
I'm sorry.
Does the price include your technical support, somebody being there at voting time or no?
No,
That-
I budgeted it separately. It's my,
Okay.
different.
Gotcha.
And on that topic too, we've had a lot of discussions going into kind of the health check part of the elections. What we've seen in the last few years around the state is it's becoming more and more critical for the clerk and the election board to stay within the courthouse. Once that absentee ballot process begins, we start opening envelopes. We want to be able to answer that we were in the room the whole time ballots were opened. With that in mind, a lot of counties are starting to implement an additional local election day support. Jim would go out and visit the voting machine if there was an issue. I personally feel those days are kind of gone for the clerk staff to leave the office once the absentee ballot process starts. And so the hope would be to find a Republican, Democrat team, local men or women that would be available to dispatch to a location that we would train, no cost to the county. We would train them to help supplement election day support. The observation over absentee ballots has just gone to a whole new level. And I think
What's the pleasure of the council then?
So we update the screens and stuff now and the equipment. What's the lifespan then at that point of the equipment we have? I mean, is it going to be good for another 7 to 10 years? Are we looking at any replacements within that 10-year period again?
I would think 20. I mean,
You're talking of all new purchasing now. You're talking about just spotting stuff in right now, right?
No, I'm talking about
The
screens we're
panel.
talking about, but the new boxes and everything.
Okay.
The whole thing. The whole package. It should
The
be good.
request, yeah.
Yeah, it should
Yeah.
be good for,
I mean, the last one was 20 years, and this is a more, I won't say more reliable, but it's more solid state. People noticed from our last upgrade, when you're near the panel now, it runs warm, it runs hotter because we had to upgrade the processor in that, and it's a sealed box, no fan or anything. I feel that has led to a little bit of the deterioration of the screen. I think that additional heat within the box is what's moved the screen closer to end. This one runs ice cold. It's just a solid state. It's like a cell phone, so.
I would say that we do it through the budget process. I would say it would make the most sense then if we do it that way. And then I think we've been talking about this capital development plan that we need to be coming up with. And this is one of those things where maybe 20 years, but 200,000, that's 10,000 a year. And of course, in 20 years from now, it's not going to be 200 anymore.
Yeah. Just in my 30 years of elections, we went from the average cost of equipment in a precinct was about $5,500.
Yeah.
And now it's about $25,000, if not more, depending on the system.
So somehow we need to get that into some kind of a queue, something somewhere. I don't know how we do that, but.
Some counties, I know Knox County, Jefferson County have traditionally had voting technology funds that they seed. But some of them abandoned it because they were kind of like, it wasn't enough to dent it at the end anyhow. And so they found themselves, putting 30,000 a year in this fund. You being vote centers now changes it dramatically. It does save on ongoing costs, but.
So do we technically need a motion to deny then so that it goes in the budget, or we just don't do anything?
No, I would say you just table it because maybe at budget time we will decide to
I see.
allocate that to ARPA. So
Okay.
table that just as you table the.
We're approving we're saying yes to the equipment, right?
Yeah.
We just haven't decided how to fund it.
That's a commissioner's. commissioners say yes to stuff. You say yes to how it gets funded.
Oh,
You're deferring the funding decision until budget time.
Any other
Which
questions?
they've already done, right?
Yes, the commissioners have already said.
So there you go. Yeah, one way or the other, you'll get.
One way or another, it'll get funded.
Another meeting?
No, hopefully not, with the budget stuff.
Another meeting that could have been an email.
So, and I think by maybe come August, deep fall, when we get closer to that presidential election, come back in for any council commission questions about preparation for that election. We started on it from day one when she took office, started talking about next year already. And so it'll be on everyone's mind much heavier come this November.
Well, I guess, actually, you brought that 6-month thing. Could we pull the trigger one way or the other now so they can get rolling?
I'll make preparations for that.
Okay.
I'm leaving her comfortable that, the equipment won't go to waste here or somewhere else if I get the ball rolling with it.
They'll save some for us.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the few counties that does this health check every year, and I really appreciate it on my end because there's no surprises come December when somebody's been thinking about something for a year.
Mhm.
It really helps all three pieces click. So.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Julie Marie?
I just have one thing today. It appears, and Tony and Bree can go over this in greater detail, I've alerted you to the fact that we have a number of ARPA projects that have been approved that have the need for additional funding. One of those is the chillers, the HVAC and cooling system. And there are currently bills outstanding in excess of the amount that was budgeted in the total of $37,746. So what I have is a resolution that would propose to supplement that prior allocation of $300,000 from ARPA for the HVAC and chillers. So for your consideration, if you'd like to approve that as ARPA money to supplement the prior ARPA approved project.
You said 37,000 change?
Yes, $37,746.
And so then there's just one other one left that might be going over.
We have WebEx, we have generator, which both might go over. Not sure how much.
Yeah, we still don't know about that.
Make a motion to approve the 37,000 and
What's the resolution?
change.
I'm sorry, what's the resolution? I always forget to do that.
I would look it up, but she'd probably beat me to. Year 14.
So this would be resolution 2023-14.
And
No second yet, though.
I'll second.
All those in favor of resolution 2023-14?
Aye.
Opposed? So
That's all I have. Thank you.
Sign it first. Go back to it. Get it at the end. You'll already. Won't have to chase you down the road. You're ready for transfers.
Okay. Tony?
You all should have received several transfers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different transfers. We can do those all at once. If you have questions on any of those, shout them out.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfers.
Second. Who said second first?
Corey?
Don't have second first.
Rex? Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else?
And we have two on the salary ordinance. One for jailer and one for Golden Meadows. Again, if you have any questions on that, shout them out. Otherwise, we'll get a motion on that.
Kathy.
Kathy.
Second.
That is salary ordinance. You can say.
All those in favor of the motion? Opposed?
That's all that I have.
Additionals.
This one's the media. Somebody come see it, or we made it work.
Other matters properly presented? Ed?
We'll do our best to.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
I got two things this morning. I'd like to let you know that all of the Golden Meadows land auction proceeds have been taken care of. After all of the taxes paid, all the fees paid, all the closing costs, we ended up netting $1,792,013.95. And I have invested that in a Trust Indiana sub-account. I'm getting 5.12% interest, and that is compounded daily. It is completely liquid. I can get to it today. I can get to it next month, next year. But it's squirreled away down in that Trust Indiana sub-account at 5.12%. So that's really good interest. I could have got a touch more if I would have put it into a CD. I chose not to do that because this keeps it liquid this way. If we decide we want to do it, we can. The highest rate in CDs I can get right now is only 6 months. So that would be something we'd have to roll over from time to time.
What the percentage of
It would be 5.3% as of today if I would do a 6 month CD. And CDs right now, banking wise, are kind of going backwards. It used to be if you put it away for 3 years, 5 years in a CD, it would bring more money. But right now, with all the uncertainties, the 6 months is the highest rate you can get. It goes down from there. Bob in the banking industry realizes, and it's kind of funny because that's backwards of what it traditionally has always been. But that's just kind of the current market right now.
Yeah, inverted yield curve. Short-term treasuries are worth a lot more than long-term.
Right. So
We could probably do 6 months, couldn't we? Wouldn't be all that fast, would we?
For what, 1/10%?
Couple tenths. On what was the figure?
5.3% versus 5.12%.
Money about, what was it?
$1.7 million. 1.792 million. So. Okay. Let you know that. And the second thing, I just want to, it was brought up earlier about the voting machines. And this would relate to any decision that you gentlemen and ladies might make about payments. When a vendor offers to allow you to pay in 2 payments rather than pay it all at once, that money for the second year, if there's no interest involved through the vendor, we can keep that money in our accounts and make the interest off that. Now that would be with the voting machines, could be with any vendor that we might have. So it's out of sight, out of mind if you pay it all at once. But if you do payment in the payments, if you do make payments on any outlay like that, we make a little bit more interest. And I always look out for all that, best I can. So that's all I have. If you have any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job.
Thanks, Ed.
Stan?
as you know, the Judicial Facilities Review Committee has been meeting, and I asked the firm of Elevatus to come down and help us with that study. They have submitted a letter of proposal to do this study, and that study would include the research that they've done up to this point. The drawings has been directed by the committee, and that study would propose to conclude with conceptual drawings and ballpark pricing. So I gave you all a letter of that proposal, and I didn't get it on the agenda as far as asking for an appropriation today, but the commissioners have approved this letter of proposal. And so I guess I'm hoping for a consensus and some direction as far as satisfying that ask of $19,500. I don't see anything in the commissioner's budget. I don't know if we would want to look to a CUME fund as far as CUME cap 1138, CUME courthouse 1140. If you would want to look at the fund created by the sale of the farm, or if you'd want to look at ARP money, but I guess I would ask for a consensus to approve that, as I think they're getting close to making a completion of that study. So, and I know John and Fred have participated in the meetings as we've gone along since March. The first meeting was in March, and they're hoping to complete the study by the end of June. So
This covers all the costs of the things that come out.
And just for perspective, when the commissioners did this study, it was with Schenkel and Schultz in 2011, 2012, and 2013. They did a similar study for courthouse facilities and brought it to completion with conceptual drawings and ballpark pricing. And at that time, the study was $44,500. So they've been able to bring a lot of that research forward with them. And so they were able to, what I feel is, give us a good deal. So what I'm asking for is just kind of a little bit of thoughts on your, number one, your consensus to agree to pay them, because they've been operating in good faith up to this point. But also as far as where you'd like to see that money come from. So.
They've already been doing the work. I mean, so we're gonna have to pay them for sure. But I do have a question, like where we stand as far as, I mean, I kind of made some assumptions when which I definitely want to be on that committee, and I am, but kind of thinking it was just approved and we were moving forward. And, you know, being part of that committee, I think that price tag is going to be big, honestly. And so we're definitely staring, you know, another bond right in the face. Are we thinking we're actually going to pull the trigger on that?
Well, that's why I felt the first step was to do a study committee, because unless we actually look at what our needs are, we look at what our space needs are, we look at what our facilities needs are, and we do the study, and that study comes back to the committee, then the committee will look at that and decide whether to make a recommendation to the full council and commissioners. So at this point, there are no decisions, there are no specific recommendations, but I think that this is going to be a study that Elevatus has followed the committee's direction. I mean, initially when we started, we looked at probably 5, 6 different options on what do we do, where do we go, you know, and, you know, as the committee has moved forward and built a consensus, I think the consensus has directed Elevatus, Dave Scholl and Tony Vai on what we want to see. So they've specifically followed the committee's direction on both from their research and from the feedback they got from the committee. And that committee includes both judges, Judge Conrad and Judge Kugelhahn. It includes the prosecutor, Jeremy Brown. It includes the public defender, Brad Weber. I also had invited the mayor, Dan Rickard, to sit on that committee.
because whatever happens will affect the city of Decatur. And also Ian Gilbert from Community Corrections, Jack Odell from Probation, and Shelley Bright from the clerk's office, along with both of you from council. So I tried to make it a complete committee with all the stakeholders that would be able to give realistic feedback on what our needs are. So I tried to make it as complete of a study committee as possible so that we could come back with a good, sensible recommendation on what to do.
Am I remembering correctly that the hospital bond, we decided it still has like another 10 years on it?
That's correct.
Is that what we decided? Yeah.
So does the jail.
So any recommendations to move forward, you're absolutely right. They might not happen 5 years, 10 years, but I think we wouldn't, when you talk about what the price tag is going to be, we wouldn't have a clue until we studied it and kind of looked at our current facilities and what we're going to need. So, I think that's going to bring us to that next step when we start talking about bonds and how do we finance. At least we'll kind of have some pretty realistic numbers to deal with. But up until this point, we don't know. We wouldn't have known what we need. We wouldn't have known how much it would have cost. We wouldn't have known what to finance. So this study is going to bring us into some reality to make those decisions.
I think to take care of the first matter at hand here, we need to decide where it's coming from. And so, that or ARPA.
Hey, Stan,
Yeah.
you've got, this letter's dated April 17th. They got a schedule down here where they had meetings. You have a meeting on the 24th of May and June the 7th. And then they say their conceptual drawings, they feel they could be done by as early as June 21st. This schedule shot down.
Well, it may be done. We've got a meeting this Wednesday night at 4:00 with the committee. So, yeah, they may not have them by the 21st. You're right. So there's nothing promised as far as that date. But you're right. That was so what I did when they proposed the letter to me, I proposed it to our attorney to say, hey, does this make sense? Is it okay? And then I presented it to the other commissioners, and as a body, we approved moving ahead. The commissioners approved moving ahead with this proposal. So,
I don't know, Mark or Julie Marie or Clayton, is there a threshold that if you get past a certain amount on a project like this, that it has to be a referendum, or is that just schools? Where taxpayers would vote on it?
Depends on how you're paying for it.
So isn't that how we approached the jail, is we did not necessarily want a referendum, so we came up with other alternatives?
Yeah, well, the jail project did not go on property tax. That's why there was no need for referendum. That was funded through the public safety law and CUNY jail.
Okay, I'm just thinking out loud on how that process would have to work after Corey had mentioned the bonds that are already out there and so forth.
It can be a long process. Just depends on it all depends on the funding source.
Well, first, are we saying Kim Cap or ARPA? I think would be your choice. Either way, it's an additional, correct?
What's that? Additional?
Yeah, either way, it would have to be an additional appropriation next month because it's too late. We didn't have time to advertise it.
yeah, I apologize for not.
You just got to get it advertised. As far as the cost for the professional services to do conceptual drawings, design, yeah, that's all. And you can appropriate those funds, and once you have that appropriation, you can sign a contract for those services. But once you get to a point of actual, talking about construction and cost, now you're into, the financing and what's the source? Is it going to be bonded or going to be funded through some form of income tax or a combination of income tax and a CUNY fund? I mean, that's what we have to figure out.
Is this ARPA qualifying?
Yeah, it is, because it's yeah, it's something for capital improvements.
Like I said, ARPA would be my preference, and I really don't want to touch that Q cap.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Would that be something I could advertise for next month?
19.5.
So, yeah, so I don't know if, we do have a meeting tomorrow night with the architects and with the committee. Would there be a consensus that I could bring to them that?
I'll make a motion to pay the 19.5 out of ARPA funds. Second.
Fred and Rex. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
So as
Yeah,
a
just get
justification
the-
for that meeting, it's
Just need the paperwork for the additional out of ARPA, but we can help you with that if you come up.
Okay.
I didn't get one either.
Stan, was this just a conceptual design that this pays for, or what did the study include?
Correct. On that letter of proposal, what they've done, they've actually went in and they've met with every department head in our judicial system, including community corrections and everybody. And they did space discovery as far as what the current space is. And what we asked them to do was project out, because whatever facilities may come out of this, we would be dealing with for a long time. So we asked them to get their crystal ball out and have every department kind of look ahead as far as anticipating future needs too. So yeah, they did the interviews, workflow, space needs, and then through narrowing down the options that we had, they kind of moved towards a focus as the committee directed them. So, yeah. And then it'll include the conceptual drawings plus potential costs. So yeah, it's a pretty complete study.
I know, thank you.
one thing when it does come to that, well, obviously there's gonna be a lot of things to consider, but then I think it's gonna be a pretty big price tag, but the fact of the matter is, things will not get cheaper either.
No, that's true.
You've covered additionals and
I don't know.
transfers.
Yeah, we didn't have any additional.
Speaking of
Covered
that bond.
transfer to salary ordinances. So yeah, that's a, unless you have any other matters.
Any
So-
other matters to be brought?
I will say, I mean, John said he never got a notification for that meeting either, though, Stan. I don't know.
For tomorrow.
I mean, that,
Because I know we discussed the date at the last meeting, but maybe there wasn't additional notice. Because you weren't at the last meeting.
Mhm.
But you said this could be helpful, like if we decide, hey, let's get the plans put together, we have an idea, but, you know, those other two bonds don't end for 10 years, we don't start for 5, obviously price numbers are going to change, but at least we can get some of the framework going. I'm not saying we would do that, but we have that option, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, whatever recommendation comes out of the committee that comes to commissioners and council, that will be a commission council.
Yeah.
Are there any other matters to be brought before us this morning?
Yeah, like I said, when we're talking about those bonds, specifically the hospital bond, is there any way for us to renegotiate our terms or at all? Or I guess get an amortization schedule of what the terms are currently? Because we're paying a percentage of our seated, and those funds go up year after year. We're receiving more dollars and paying more while it's been refinanced three times. So the hospital,
to probably lower their payment, right?
yeah, so they're paying less and we're paying more, so that the teeter-totter is being set so high at this point. And in the meantime, the hospital as a group is expanding and purchasing more and building more. And we're paying more into it than what was originally established.
Well, if I recall, my last question to the hospital attorney was, where does our money go? It doesn't go to pay the bond. It goes for operations. And that was my concern, but we should really ask them to pay it off because I know they have the money.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Well,
We're
if they
gonna
pay it off,
be
they won't
facing
get our money
a
anymore.
different bond. And I'm wondering if we should, as a board, ask for an outside attorney to come and speak, just because of the ties with, and no offense, the inner workings of a small community and the relationships where you might not get the best questions, you might not get the best answers, just to remove all doubt and people's friendships and relationships completely put aside, have an outsider, maybe somebody that specializes in A, bonds, or B, hospitals, or C, both, just to see what our true options are. Not saying anything, nobody has done anything
Steve?
wrong.
I think you all received a letter from Adam Miller recently. I know I got a copy of it. I think you talked to council on it also. After their last refinancing, they have been reimbursing the taxing entities the amount of that refinancing, the amount of the improvement in the payments that they had to make. I think that money's coming back to us.
Mhm.
So at least in the last refinancing, we are receiving a reduction in the amount of tax dollars that we're sending, or an offset, the amount of tax dollars we're sending to the hospital. To pay those
Yeah, on
costs.
good faith, we take it that that's what it is, but we have no idea. I mean, it could be more, they could be giving us more than we need, they could be giving us less.
We have, one of the things that has happened recently, and we just went through this as commissioners. We recently did go up and met with the hospital board, and they went through all their financial picture with us. So we had the opportunity to see that. I know y'all did not, but we had the opportunity to go through that, including their financing. But just, I know in the past, that's been played very, very close as far as that information at the hospital. They've opened that up a little bit so that the commissioners at least once a year are invited in, and they go through all of their numbers in executive session with their board. Just so you know that we are also getting to take a look at those numbers.
Okay, well, I guess still we are not. And now we're coming to another opportunity for a bond.
I think if you look at the document that was signed back when that, I think we as a county are pretty locked in as far as what we're doing. Mark, I think you've looked at that recently, and I just don't see an opportunity for us to change that arrangement. I think on a good faith effort, the hospital is refunding the benefit that they received through refinancing those bonds back to the county. I don't think they would have to do that based upon the contract that we have.
Right. Then my concern is now the scales have been turned. Looking at it from an airplane, you can just conceptualize, over the years, our payments went up, to the city of Decatur's payments have went up, and their rate has went down and their payments have gone down. So we're bailing out the boat by ourselves, from an airplane. And until, I'd like to see more clarification. That's why I recommend getting an outside attorney to come in and ask unbiased questions from an unbiased person.
The problem's going to be, I think the contract is the contract, and I don't believe you have an opportunity to change that based upon our legal counsel's review of the contract.
No, we could get independent bond counsel to take a look at it. It's the whole hospital project, that was funded by a 0.2% incremental increase in the cedar tax for the county and the cities and towns. So when that was done, then that 0.2%, that's locked in, and that is part of the repayment stream for the bonds. And then hospital revenues are the other portion of that. So there was not any general bond issue done when the hospital was built. I think the price tag back at the time was about $40 million on that project.
There was no increase in property tax to build the hospital. That was all done through CEDAT, which is economic development, which, council and the commissioners, council and the commissioners were all intimately involved, had to be in that process from the beginning. So those decisions were made by the commissioners and the council that were, elected back at the time, and that's how that was put in place. And then that 0.2%, because it's an income tax, is completely dependent upon the revenues generated by that tax in any given year. In good years, it can go up, and bad years, it can go down, but it's, whatever it is, that 0.2% is pledged directly to the trustee that is in charge of making those bond payments. And so it's locked in. And so that's just on autopilot. That just happens every year. They pay the money to the, I think Bank of New York is the trustee on that. And they
So
make sure the bond
Does it say anything in the contract though? Okay, so it's my understanding that they've renegotiated or redid their bond, at least twice, right?
I think they did 2 refinancings. So there was the original issue that I think was maybe 2002 or 2006. I can't remember for sure. Might have been 2. And then they did a refinance a few years later. When they did the refinance, they didn't extend the term of the bonds.
I understand that, but it still would have lowered their
It
payment,
lowered the interest rate.
but nothing got lowered to us
Yeah, but
technically.
when you do the original bond issue, those bonds are all laddered. Okay, so in the original bond issue, there's a whole section of bonds that are out at a 30-year maturity, 25, 20, 15, 10, they're all laddered. And so those 30 years, you can't pay those off. It's not like a regular mortgage where you can go into the bank and say, I want to pay my mortgage off today. Those bonds are locked into those bondholders. And to pay those off, then you would pay a penalty to redeem them if you even can. And that's why in the bond market, you get good rates. It's a tax-free municipal bond, and it gets qualified as a municipal bond. Investors like to buy those. You've heard of school bonds. Investors like to buy school bonds. This is hospital bonds. So they're tax-exempt, interest-free bonds. They get sold in the secondary market, and then that obligation is locked in. So when the hospital did a refinance, they refinanced the shorter maturities, but they couldn't necessarily refinance the 30s. And so we're getting to the point, and I'll have to go back and look. I can't remember, Steve. Are we 3 years away from being able, or it's not, I mean, it's coming to the point where, maybe they could pay it off, maybe there would be a penalty, maybe they would, and that's something that certainly you could hire bond counsel to look into. Or maybe even Baker Tilly could look at it and say, here's what you can do, and then see about getting it paid. When that happens though, when those bonds get paid off, then that tax goes away. That's a seated income tax. That tax goes away. It doesn't just keep going because it was pledged only to pay those bonds. And so then the county income tax council, once that is paid off, county income tax council, which is comprised, over 52% or 4% is the county council, then the county can turn around and say, okay, we're gonna pass that 0.2% and we're gonna use that now for some other project. It could actually be used to bond another project where you may just put it in place for whatever projects you wanna save money for, but that's how that works.
That's what we're kind of thinking along the lines of, we're obviously gonna have a bond for this judicial facilities whenever it gets done. And so what does that look like without trying to raise any taxes or, at least would be my thought.
Those bonds are locked in, the rates are locked in at the time that you do that issue.
We're responsible to investors who are guaranteed that rate. I understand that.
Yeah, they are.
But those of us that have worked in the school board know lots of times when you engage in a
a new project, you can, the bond council will help you kind of dovetail those bond payments together so that your bond payments, for instance, if you decide you wanted to do this project before the jail bond's paid off or the hospital bond's paid off or something, they can structure those payments such that the bonds that you would, the amount that you would pay prior to the payoff on those bonds is significantly less. And then once those bonds pay off, then you can ratchet that, those payments up. So there's a lot of creative ways that once the decision's been made or after you make a decision to go forward with the project, then I think the bond council will come up with a lot of different options you can look at for how it gets financed, what the payments look like, how actually the tax dollars or the bond payments are interwoven in with all your other bond payments. So it can be.
I only brought it up because just based on the payments that we're making, we started out at $400,000 a year, and now we're up to $800,000. So that's went up.
It was out of the game. And when we did the original issue, I think that, and I have to go back and look, but we got the amortization schedule and everything, but I think the 0.2% seated was generating pretty close. It was just under $1 million a year, but it was that much. It comes in 2 installments. It comes, isn't that right? I think it comes in halves.
Yeah.
So I think the 400 is a half. The reason I know is because there's also a corresponding seated rate for the county. And the county's corresponding seated rate is 0.2. And so, the county itself is generating over $1 million a year just in their portion of seated. And so hospitals that have to look and see, but I think originally the seated portion of that 0.2% county-wide for everything that went to that bond, it was close to $1 million, if not right there. But you're right, over years, because that was, 20 years ago. There's more income tax revenue. Because it's driven by income tax, then that amount has gone up.
All right. That was my whole point. And I'm looking at Decatur's portion. They're also on their same terms, second largest contributor, and it went from 250,000 up to, and that was in 04, to 450,000. So incrementally, they've been paying too.
But
it's up to almost double.
Probably more so than even bond counsel. I think it's probably more of a financial analysis of what could be done and to pay it off early, and what do those numbers look like. And that's probably something for Baker Tilly. I mean, we could get bond counsel involved, and they can, at least from the bonding standpoint, tell you what you can do, what you can do and what you can't do. But I think it's still going to require a financial component to analyze the financial options.
So what do we need to do to do that?
To help us with the jail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you remember, years ago, and then they changed their name to Baker Tilly a while back. Yeah, it was Baker Tilly.
What do we need to do to have some kind of an analysis?
I'd make a motion to hire outside counsel to figure out what we can do. And I don't know.
I think we should make a motion to explore that, not necessarily currently do it. See what, you know what I mean?
Somebody needs to get us a quote, basically.
Yeah.
I think we really have to understand what outside advice would benefit us before we hire somebody to do it. I mean, you're not going to make the hospital pay the bond any sooner. It's a given.
How long have they been, supposedly returning funds to us? I mean, does that happen every year? Or my impression is that it doesn't unless we complain, basically.
Like this. Last year was.
Yeah, so I mean, they've been paying the same rate.
2016, so that's when they first gave it. But then they stopped, they didn't give it to us consecutively, but they did last year.
At that time, it was a one-time gift.
Our interest.
So the amount they paid because of refinancing has gone down, while because of income's going up, what we're giving them has gone up significantly. And so they've just been pocketing that money.
I think we need to enter into an honest discussion with the hospital about paying them off early. I mean, that's where we should start, I feel.
You know, I almost wonder if a good place to start would be have a discussion with Adam. I mean, he's been involved with this, you know, for a long time. You know, he's always been very forthright as far as, you know, information that we're serving.
I do feel like we need outside counsel on this though.
I think we should explore it first and then.
And just, I mean, you want me to like get some, I know people that do this, I'm gonna get some bids and see,
Yeah,
and then get back next month with that.
but also ask,
I've got this email.
can we do anything about it? Because we are under contract.
What you're thinking of, we need to ask someone, we need one of the attorneys to look at it and say, what are the legal options? Someone financial to look at it and say, what are the financial options, but you can't do both.
Adam had asked for your email and Stan's email as to who were the
Or
chair.
we only need a motion, but
Probably went to you and
We just,
so
we don't even need motions, I'm just gonna get some quotes next week on that.
Adam
We
asked
can
who
bring back
the
next month and see what we,
persons were.
I mean, all of us saying we don't need a motion to do that.
no,
We can do that.
I'll just go do it.
But yeah, you want to go ahead, Corey?
Any legal advice you need to give us?
No, you want outside counsel, you should get it.
I know a few people I can get some quotes for at least, and we can see.
Jason Emler might have been in on this, the jail thing from the beginning. Baker Tilly, not involved in it. Can't remember if he was or not. He might be.
I can ask around a couple places.
Yeah. Get that reduction. If they would pay us that reduction, it'd be safe.
Financial order.
That way we wouldn't have to pay an outside counsel.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can do both.
We could do that, if we could get that done.
Any further discussion? Any other matters to be brought before us? Ask for a motion to adjourn then.
Motion to adjourn.
Fred and Tom. All those in favor? Opposed?